everyone. Guillaume Ritzuel here, host of the E-commerce Wizards podcast, where I feature top leaders in e-commerce and business. Today's guest is Shawn Johal. He's CEO of Elevation Leader. He's a certified scaling up coach, which is the methodology of Vern Harnish, and he's an international best-selling author. So I'm very happy to have Shawn here again for a second time. So this is the second portion of this series that we're doing. We're talking about the 4 pillars of scaling up with this methodology by Vern Harnish, which is an amazing book. I have great respect for, and that we partially use in-house here, but not nearly as much as well with a certified scaling up coach. So in the first episode, we talked about 3 of the 4 pillar. We talked about people, strategy, execution, and we were missing the 4th pillar, which is cash, and it's why we're back here today. This episode is brought to you by MageMontreal. If a business wants a powerful e-commerce online store that will increase their sales, or to move piled up dormant inventory to free up cash reserves, or to automate business processes to gain efficiency and reduce human processing errors, our company, MageMontreal, can do that. We've been helping e-commerce stores for over a decade. Here's the catch. We're specialized and only work in the Adobe Magento platform. We're among a handful of certified Adobe Magento companies in Canada. We do everything Magento related. If you know someone who needs design, development, maintenance, training, support, we got their back. Email our team, support@MageMontreal.com, or go to MageMontreal.com. That's MAGE Montreal.com. All right, Shawn, pleasure having you here today.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Guillaume. Really appreciate it.
All right, so this framework is awesome. The scaling up can be used by, I guess, company of almost any sizes, but it's perfect, especially once you cross that 250 employee threshold. You're getting into the much larger company space, and some other competing frameworks such as EOS, which is specifically made just for 10 to 250 employees, just are not applicable anymore because it's the larger scale stuff now. And EOS anyway is a spin-off of the original, which is scaling up, but EOS was made for smaller companies. So let's talk about this, because cash, as Vern says, the entrepreneurial law of gravity is that growth sucks cash, which is so true. So let's talk about this. What's your advice for businesses?
So there are so many different levels that we're going to talk about cash today. And I think what's really important for businesses to understand is cash is very undervalued and underrated. And I say it, people understand cash, they know how important it is, but yet in businesses, it's the last thing we seem to work on. It's really crazy when we get in there as a scaling up coach, and we start asking very specific questions about cash flow, about operating expenses, about volume, about cost of goods sold, and how little people really know about those things. So the first thing is to really, I understand, diagnose 2 major elements when you're going into the cash and discussing this. We like to call the first element the power of one. So what we're going to do through the power of one is we're going to look at the 7 levers that we consider to be the most important for every business. Can you guess what those 7 levers are, Guillaume? Would you have an idea?
That's a difficult one. Okay,
Maybe give you one of them.
Well, the 7 levers. Well, for sure, you'll have your sales. That's the top line. That's one of those.
You'll have volume. We consider that volume.
The
Absolutely.
volume. Then you'll have your production cost, giving you a gross profit.
Yeah. So when we look at the 7 levers, you have your volume and you have pricing. Okay. So we're looking at those and how they affect your business overall. So that's the first relationship, because there's going to be a few different relationships. So price versus volume. Why is this so important? When I speak to so many different entrepreneurs and so many companies, I always ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? And they always say the same thing. I'm trying to increase my revenue, right? I said, okay, so how are you going to increase revenue? I want to get more volume. I want more clients. Okay, that's how we're going to grow. The thing is, that might not be the best solution. The best solution might be reviewing your entire pricing structure and actually seeing, are you charging the right amount for your services? Maybe you're charging completely the wrong amount. And if you haven't got the pricing right, not only you're not growing from a revenue perspective, but you're probably hurting your bottom line. So we really have to make companies understand the difference between price and volume and how it affects their business. The next 2 levers are cost of goods sold versus overhead. And again, these are 2 things that have a lot of differences based on the type of business you have. My business is more of a traditional LED lighting business where we have product, we have inventory. We're going to have differences in our cost of goods sold versus overhead based on other companies. We have a big warehouse. So, the different costs come in. You have to see how you can play with those numbers and how you can reduce them And then the next three, so you have your first four, the next three are receivables, payables, and then work in progress or inventory based on the type of business that you have. If you're more of a service business, you'll have more work in progress. If you have a more traditional business, you may have some inventory. So we take those seven levers and we teach our clients basically how each one of those levers is affecting their business. And if you could only adjust one of those levers by 1%, so just picture this, Guillaume, that you're doing a 1% increase on volume, 1% on price, you're doing a 1% reduction on cost of goods sold, 1% reduction on overhead. One day, receivables are cut down by one day, payables are increased by one day, and your inventory is cut down by one day. Just those seven levers in any business can represent not only thousands, not only hundreds of thousands, but in larger businesses could represent millions of dollars of bottom line directly. So we really go through that first portion and teach people how to look at those seven levers and how they impact their business specifically.
All right. So of course, when possible, either to raise the price or to restructure the whole offer, because sometimes you may say, well, no, let's just raise the minimum order. And actually, what I want is a certain amount of volume per customer to even accept a customer, and even sometimes a lower hourly rate, if it's a service company, might be fine as long as they commit to say $5,000 or $10,000 services per month or more.
Yeah, exactly. And not all levers are made equally. So that's where when we do this exercise, we'll actually take, for example, your company's numbers, Guillaume. We're going to input into a software called Cash Flow Story. And that's going to pop out all the information about your business. And it's actually going to tell us the relationship between volume and price for your specific business. And that's going to be different for every business. But for your business, price might be 1.8 times more important than volume, or volume might be 3 times more important than price. Until you know that information, you don't know what you're doing from a sales perspective. You don't know if you should be going after more volume or you should be increasing your prices. So that's where we'll help businesses out there figure that part out.
Yeah. So it would depend how much you can scale up the volume processing, or how large of a market can you possibly get. How much more market penetration can you get, or how many more leads per month can you get, and so on. To see if you can actually process that much more volume, or if the expertise is extremely rare and you have to, hunt down every single engineer that you recruit to offer the service. Well, maybe actually it's a more of a price game, that positioning the marketing differently, presenting differently to showcase a higher value so that we can charge more. And that's a different kind of approach. Okay, so those seven levers are very interesting. Anything else specifically about this? Otherwise, we'll move we can move the discussion also about the financing.
Yeah,
Once we're done with the
absolutely.
seven levers.
Yeah, great point. The last thing I'll say about the seven levers is, we call it the power of one because you could increase or decrease by 1%. But realistically, you probably want to do different types of adjustments. And I always explain to companies, have an open mind with that. You may, for your business, want to do a 4% price increase, no volume increase, a 2% reduction of cost of goods sold, no effect on the overhead. You're going to play with the numbers and play with the ratios. It's not always going to be perfect for every single business. It's not going to be the same formula. You want to be open-minded and flexible to be able to adapt and adjust based on what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Right. Very good point. So, and of course, work in progress inventory, you always want to have as little as possible of that stuff, a strict minimum, so that the business does not uh, stutter from lack of inventory and so on. Okay. Then let's say if we talk about financing, because I said it in the first episode of this series, and I'll say it again this time, but you did scale up an 8-figure lighting company there. So I'm pretty sure you have some experience in financing.
Yeah, we'd have to go through it a lot of times. Financing for us was an absolute Achilles heel for a long time. So it was a very big challenge. When we started our business, we were coming from bankruptcy. So we didn't have a very good reputation in the marketplace. We didn't have a lot of money. So when we actually started our business, we couldn't get any bank to fund us. So we actually did not have any traditional financing. We had to go to something called factoring. And if any of your audience and listeners know what factoring is,
I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So factoring is obviously you're borrowing on your receivables and your inventory, but the company that's giving you the factoring basically owns that. And what they do is as you sell a little bit more, you order a little more inventory, they give you a little more availability. The problem is that we're talking about an 8 to 10% interest rate compared to a traditional bank, which will be anywhere between 2 and 4%. So it's a disastrous interest rate. we had no choice to go in this direction because we just did not have the financial capabilities to show the bank that we had leverage. So we had to start out that way. Took a little bit of time, but over time, as we built our credibility in the marketplace, as we made our payments, even with this factoring company, we eventually got ourselves into our bank. And TD Bank supported us. I don't mind mentioning them because they've been a great partner for us. They really helped us take that next step into more traditional financing, if you want to call it that. We never looked for outside sources on our end, Guillaume. We wanted to keep it, we're a private business. We wanted to keep the financing internally. We felt it was easier to do it that way and grow organically and work with the bank. The number one lesson that we learned through financing is, and this is easy to say, but not easy to do, you should be asking for as much money as possible when things are going well. And this is something that entrepreneurs and businesses don't do. What happens is you have some availability, line of credit, you have some financing options, but then you hit a wall, right? What happens is you start freaking out, you have an amazing opportunity. Whatever happens, you need to bring in more financing, but now you're against the clock and you're against the wall. Now you're stuck. And now you're going to the bank and now you're begging them to help you. Hey, can you please help me? I really have this opportunity, but I need more money. That's not a good time. You're not putting yourself in a favorable position. I would tell your listeners what's more important to do is make sure that when things are positive and cash flow healthy, that's when you should be working hardest to go increase your lines of credit, increase your financing opportunities, go to the BDC, go to investment, IQ, whoever your local government, your local, whoever's in your area helping with financing, because globally there's always organizations, and get that availability and have it in your back pocket. Have it there available to you so that one day when you do need the money, you'll already have it available. You're not chasing at that point, which is a very dangerous game.
Totally agree, especially on the line of credit. You should get that as big a line of credit as you can possibly get. That's pretty much it. And then, of course, use it with discipline. But that definitely is the best, because then you have all that amount pre-authorized. You only use what you need to use, and then you refund it as soon as something is deposited in the checking account. And if you have a fast-growing company, the banker might even allow you to go over their traditional ratio of which percentage they want to give for versus the business volume in terms of the line of credit limit there. So some interesting things. And did you work also with any of the government agencies, like you were mentioning, like Investissement Québec, Quebec Investment, or other ways of fundraising and so on?
We were always keeping a very close eye and in touch with them. We made sure we had excellent relationships. We never got into a situation where we actually needed to work with them directly. Now we're looking at financing our building and doing a big expansion. And of course, we're going to start looking to those partners to see what makes sense and what's available to us. But I would say, as a CEO of a business, you should always be speaking to all of the agencies in your neck of the woods. Not only the popular ones. A lot of times, there's ones we don't know that much about. Kind of under the underground, a little bit under the radar, that could actually offer quite a bit of financing and a bit of some grants are even available out there. So I would really encourage people to go out there and find out what's available to you. It's always shocking to me to find out how much can be done. Just to give you a perspective, when we go into companies and we work with them on scaling up, there's a lot of clients that say, hey, listen, it's a bit expensive. What can we do? The government will actually subsidize 50% of our mandates. So if our mandate's costing, whatever, $40,000 annually to help a client out, well, the government will actually provide $20,000 of funding for that strategic planning because they know how much it's going to help the business. So those type of funds are always available to the business owners. So that's something that you should be constantly looking at. The most profitable and savvy entrepreneurs I know always have one hand into the government. They always have their pulse on the grants available, and they're always constantly going for more money, making sure that they're funding their business a different way. And a lot of that is free money. It really is.
Yeah, you have to. Otherwise, you're not competing in a fair way, in the sense that it's not favoring you, because your competitors is asking for the free money from the government that they want to give, which is, of course, part of various plans and initiatives that they have to, let's say, improve the digital transformation in the country or whatever. And they have programs for that they'll pay, let's say, up to 50%, up to that amount, and so on. For each company, same thing for training, like you were saying here, executive training and training within the companies. They have a budget for that, yearly budget. Here in Canada, typically, if you ask for money around the month of April, that's the start of the new year. The year they don't follow the calendar in Canada, they follow month of April, which is when all the money comes in from the tax returns. So that's the best time to ask the government, right after April. They have plenty of money to spend, and if you're toward the end of the year, well, maybe it won't work. Just ask again after April.
So true.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work also sometimes to start all that paperwork, that filing for grants, subsidies, and all that stuff. So it's very good to have someone you can delegate that to as the entrepreneur. But as the entrepreneur, you must know which program are available. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
You got to take time to learn about that.
For
Did you
sure.
use any other kind of subventions, subsidies, salary subventions?
We used a ton. I mean, just going along in our history, we were given a subsidy when we wanted to change our ERP system. They were offering, a subsidy to help us analyze and understand exactly what we wanted to do on that end. HR, planning, resources, there was some available on that end as well, quite a bit. Marketing, bringing in marketing help, digital marketing, especially a lot of funding available there. It's almost unlimited when you start researching and finding out what's out there. I mean, the government's really there to help small businesses thrive. That's really their goal, is to help you have that success, have that ability to hire more people. But if you can show them that that's what you're trying to do as a business, which most scale up companies are, you should have a good opportunity to pick up some funds there.
Do you have any kind of anecdotes or learned stories from raising money like this or working with those agencies?
What I would say is be a master relationship builder. So what I've come to realize, because a lot of my clients, they work on this, and what happens is we often, see government as a little bit of sometimes a barrier, or someone that they're limiting us in some way. You have to change your mindset. To me, the mentality is the government is their absolute goal for them to be successful is that small businesses have to make money. They have to hire people. They have to be profitable. So they're actually there to help make that happen. But as an entrepreneur, your absolute number one goal is to build those key relationships, because as much as it's government and their structure, I've noticed it's actually very subjective. It's very much based on a relationship. It's based on that government person knowing that you have a need that they can help, but you have to have that relationship with them constantly. And again, not going into the situation desperate or in a bad spot. Build it when you don't need it, so that the day that you do need it, you can turn to that person and say, hey, I need your help. This is what we're looking to do. We think we can, have some great opportunities here, whether it's strategic planning, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's HR, and then they will come in and offer you a helping hand. So build those relationships. I've always noticed, and we did at our own business, at our LED lighting business. We invited the person from the government to our company, have coffee. We gave them a whole visit of our facilities. We introduced them to every single one of our employees. We showed them our 3-year, our BHAG, our 3-year, 1-year, 90-day plans. We just gave the person a full overview of what we're trying to do as a business. They were blown away. They said, no one does this. No one takes the time to meet us and to really show us their business. And they gave us, I think it was about $50,000 in subsidies at that point. So, it makes a difference. It really does. You got to make the effort.
Yeah, it's a 2-hour sales pitch with a visit for $50,000 of free money from the government. Sure, that's well paid per hour. That's worth the CEO's time. Yeah,
for sure. I agree. Absolutely.
Totally agree. And while we're talking about relationship with either bankers or those other agencies from various governments in whichever country, you need to learn what's available in your country. At least in Canada here, let's say how it works with your commercial banker. Even though you have a commercial director assigned to your case, for sure, they never have the true final approval from a check and control point of view. They always go and present your file for credit approval. So even though they have titles of directors here in Canada from whichever bank you work with, it is not that director that approves your credit request, never. But that director, your relationship with him or her is extremely important because they go pitch your request to the credit bureau of the bank. So they can make a big difference for you in how good or how well they pitch or how much effort they want to put in this or how much trust they have in you and your company into what the bank will actually finance or not finance. So a little personal experience sharing from the relationship building point of view.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
What else comes to mind when it comes to cash?
Yeah, there's a whole other element that we need to speak about that is absolutely crucial, essential for any business. It's what we call your cash conversion cycle. Okay, so the cash conversion cycle basically is the cycle between the day that money goes out of your bank account, that you have to pay your suppliers, you have to pay your employees, their payroll, and all the money that goes out of your bank account, and the day that money comes into your bank account. So there's a cycle there, and there's a gap most of the time between that cycle, unless you have, an incredible business model, which I'll explain in a second. Most companies don't. So
Get
when you have
prepaid.
that, yeah, like it exists, but not everybody has it. So, I'm going to give you an example of one of the worst cash conversion cycles that has ever existed on the face of this planet. And that was, again, my personal business, our LED
Oh,
lighting
man.
company. We had the worst cash conversion cycle that ever existed. Let me explain. We had to pay deposits to our suppliers overseas. So our supplier overseas is saying, listen, before we even start making your product, we want 50%. Okay, so now we're giving, let's say it's $100,000 production order. We're giving them 50%. We're giving them $50,000. Nothing has happened at this point except for $50,000 going out of my bank account. And then they say, okay, we'll start ordering some parts. We'll start making your order for you. The whole order gets made. It takes 90 days. So now 90 days later, my 50,000 still hasn't done anything for me. Then 90 days later, they call us and say, okay, you know what? We are now ready to ship your order. We want you to pay the balance of 50%. Because that's how the rules worked. So now you've paid 100%. You paid $100,000, and there's still nothing even near arriving at our factory. 40 days later, give or take, we get the stock. We got to unload it. We got to repack it, reship it to our clients, and then we give them, we were giving them anywhere between 45 and 60 days terms. So when you look at that cycle, that's about 8 months.
Wow.
Okay, so there's literally nothing worse. There's no company I think that could have a worse cash conversion than that. So when we started looking into that and we were working with scaling up, we said, you know what, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
We have to absolutely change
because
our model.
if you scale up too fast with this, you can actually go bankrupt. Because each time you have a new order, your cash flow goes in the negative at first by 50K, then by 100K. So how many orders of minus 100K can your company take before it's bankrupt and cannot?
That's exactly right, Guillaume. You have to be funding it all. You're funding your own business so much, so you need a lot of line of credit availability. You need a lot of cash on hand, and it's not ideal at all. So when we looked at that, we said, okay, what are we going to do about this? We absolutely have to improve it. So we made some massive changes. The first thing we did is that we were dealing with about 25 different suppliers. We consolidated that down to 4 suppliers. So that consolidation really allowed us to have buying power. We were buying. Home Depot's are one of our biggest clients, both in Canada and the US. We have the volume, but we were spreading that volume out too much. So by going to 4 main suppliers from 25, it gave us a lot of buying power. Then with that buying power, we started buying more. We started saying, listen, we're buying more from you. You've been dealing with us for a few years. You don't need a deposit from us. There's no way you need that. You should be able to trust us without deposit. Eventually they agreed. Then we started negotiating. We say, listen, why do you need us to pay you before it leaves overseas? We can just pay you when it arrives. You haven't released the paperwork yet. There's no risk for you. I say, okay, I guess you're right. With time, negotiation. But then we eliminated about 4 months from our cycle. Then we really kept going with them and said, listen, now you've trusted us. You have a great relationship. Why don't you just give us, 30-day terms once the stuff arrives? And so now we've gone to that point where we're actually getting about 30-day terms when the things arrive, which is very unheard of from things coming from overseas. And then with our own clients, we told them, listen, we can't accept 60-day payments anymore. It has to be anywhere between 15 and 30 days. We became very strict on payment terms and with a quick payment discount available to the client. So we eliminated about 6 months out of that cycle.
Wow.
Now our cycle's down to about a month and a half to 2 months. And that has just been revolutionary for our cash flow. It's been unbelievable.
Yeah, it's an amazing difference. 8 months to like 2 months or so.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're in a service business, you can sometimes just get prepaid. Of course, now we're talking about product business. And as soon as you have product business with manufacturing overseas, there's always those kind of delays. And congratulations on your negotiation. It's true. You're the first one that actually tells me that negotiated 30 days after arrival overseas, arriving here onshore. Maybe somebody else has, but they didn't tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I want to come back to the example of a company like Dell Computer. The thing is, we look at these successful companies and we often forget, we don't know the stories about what they went through. Dell Computer had a 64-day cash conversion cycle. They had the same model as I did. They would take an order from the client. They would start ordering their computer parts. they would start making the computer, they would ship it to the client, and then they would give them terms. So it was about 64 days what they calculated. One day, and I'm sure the day that Michael Dell decided to do this, all of his clients got very upset and they were freaking out. But he said, you know what? You have to pay for your computer in advance from now on. So he said to people, instead of getting 64-day terms, you're just going to pay. Once you pay me for the computer, then I'll make it and I'll deliver it to you. So he went from plus 64 days to minus 21 days. So he did an 85-day improvement in his cash conversion cycle. And he was getting all that cash in advance, taking 3 weeks to build the computer and shipping it to the client. So it was really incredible how he flipped the table. And that's why Dell is so successful today. They say that the single most specific reason they're as successful as they are is because of that cash conversion cycle improvement that they did by flipping it and making sure clients were paying in advance. Like, it could really transform your entire business if you can figure out ways to do that.
Yeah, because then you're truly scalable. Each new order that comes in reinforces your position, and you have more money available to you to hire, to order parts, to grow, do whatever you want to do. And of course, if it takes him 21 days to ship the computer to the customer once the order is placed, that gives him his minus 21 days of cash conversion cycle because it was prepaid, and then the merchandise is only done 21 days after from all the expenses of labor and parts coming together, but progressively typically. So,
exactly.
And then if he can even negotiate with his supplier to have a net 30-day term or net 60-day term to pay them even longer. It's always a question of trying to that you pay as slow as possible and that you get paid as fast as possible, and everybody's playing that game. But then it can be also a strategic advantage with some key suppliers to offer them extremely reliable terms, or let's say full-time freelancers in other countries or something like that. That you say, okay, we're going to pay you fixed every month or every 2 weeks or whatever, and they trust you that the money's coming in like clockwork. But then you can negotiate other kind of discounts because you're reliable, you're securing their cash flow and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing when we're talking about this cash conversion cycle, it really does get into the strategic thinking of your business, because I'll give you another great example. When you're thinking about how to improve cash in your business, it might go through sales, it might go through product. There's going to be a lot of different divisions, a lot of different departments that this can go through. And let's take one of the most incredible classic examples of all time, Costco, right? So, depending on the age of your listener, some of them might not remember, there was a time where Costco did not have a membership. There was a time where Costco, you could just walk in and start buying things at Costco, right? It didn't last very long, but it was just before the membership model launched for them. They launched their membership model quickly after that. You think about this for a second. In 2 years ago, in 2017, 2018, Costco, from their membership alone, it brought in, how much do you think it brought in? How much do you think
half, I know, as I can cheat. I know it's half the profit.
You know the number.
Yeah, half the profit comes just from the yearly membership card, and they can finance the next Costco store just from the sales of membership card of the previous Costco.
Yeah, so the actual amount it's actually $2.9 billion. So just to be clear, $2.9 billion of bottom line profit. This is not revenue. This is bottom line profit comes from their membership cards, and it's gone up now. That was stats from 2.5 years ago. So, that was a model that now you think about it, it's so obvious. You're going to go.
Yeah, but it's mind blowing at the same time, because most stores struggle to even get customers to walk in the store, and they will not want to put a barrier for entry. So it is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And and as a business, you have to look at your business. You have to think, what can we do differently? What can we charge for that could make a lot of sense and that could work? There's so many examples out there. I have a client that's a construction company. They started telling their clients, overnight, they said, you know what, we're really being stuck with our cash flow here. From now on, we expect the client to pay for the materials in advance. So not for the whole project of what we're going to actually deliver, but the materials, which usually account for about 40% of the order. So now they're asking that deposit from their client, which again, in an industry which doesn't do that. And they said, you know what, if you don't want to do it, go to our competitor. But they're so good at what they do. They deliver an amazing service. They have an amazing product, and clients now are paying it. So now whenever they get an order, they're getting 40%, and it's for the material good. So they don't no longer have to take material good costs out of their own cash flow, and they're funding it through their clients. And their clients are happy to do it because they're getting such a great service, and things are going very fast in an industry where right now things are backed up and there's a lot of lack of materials. So, and it's actually stabilizing the price for them because of the fact that they have all this funding. They're able to get better pricing in the market from their suppliers. So it's like this domino effect. We're all afraid to do it. We all think our customers are going to freak out. But at the end of the day, when you really get good at what you do, you can start charging those type of things. So you got to look at your own business and say, okay, what can I change in my model to make sure cash comes in quicker and that I can protect my bottom line?
Exactly. And very often it's just to go past the mental blockage and to actually do try it with customers, to dare to try it without being reckless. And some client might not agree. There could be a bit of an attrition here, but it is important to dare to have that conversation. Also, it's not that risky for the customer to pay the materials. I mean, they're buying the materials and then they will own it, and you can have your contract some kind of a a property clause that says the material belongs to you. You're just following the cash to us. We're going to buy it. We're going to deliver it at your construction project's place, whatever. And then why would I pay your material? You can push back on this. It's your material.
Exactly.
So there's all kind of ways of doing this, and it's the same for getting prepaid for anything else, or to have some kind of larger deposit, or to renegotiate a better payment schedule makes a huge difference for a company. For example, in our industry, I often heard people doing stuff like milestones of 25%, for example. But then if you ask them what's your net profit margin after taxes, well, it might or might not be 25%. So you're telling me that you're letting the client keep hostage 100% of your profits until you have delivered milestone 404. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Exactly.
So purposely keep that last milestone smaller, like 10%, that you let the guy have as hostage payment, if you wish, but you don't let that client have 100% of your profit hostage.
Exactly.
So
I totally agree with you. I think what's most important is that you don't limit yourself to just the financial part of your business. There's four main cycles that all businesses have. You need to look in all four cycles. You have your sales cycle, so how you actually going and landing your sale. You have your production cycle, so production and inventory, work in progress. That's a different cycle. You have your delivery cycle, so how are you going to actually deliver? That doesn't mean just transport. That means actually delivering your service or your product. And then you have the billing and payment cycle. So it's very important to look at all four cycles and really see in those four cycles where you can find, more improved cash acceleration strategies.
yeah, for sure. And as soon as you have a sale, you would want to collect something. It's going to allow you to celebrate the sale, that there's an influx of money. It pays a commission, faster commission to the sales staff, which is more motivating. Maybe there's another earnout for the sales staff later based on billing. At least they have the cash right now, and yeah, just makes sense.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so I had exactly that in mind, the cash conversion cycle as a discussion, or you have variation on this as well, like your inventory turnover rate. Like how many times per year does your inventory turnover? Is it two times? Is it every year and a half, or is it three times a year? Whatever, which is the same as talk to many degrees. It's very similar to your cash conversion cycle.
Yeah, it is very similar. And that's where you got to find the right metrics for your business as well. And it always comes down to profitability and bottom line. But if you're going to calculate, for example, in a more traditional business like ours, we calculate how many orders we can ship out on time and complete. The thing is, that information is only as good as the counterbalance. The counterbalance is exactly what you just said, inventory turns. Because if we tell our operations team, listen, we need you to calculate how quickly you ship all the orders and how complete they are, but we give them unlimited amount of dollars for inventory, then we're going to be in a terrible cash flow position. So you have to match both together. So it's okay. We want the highest percentage of on time and complete orders compared to the inventory turns. So we need to have we'd like to have months of inventory on stock. So we'll usually say, okay, you could have anywhere between 2.4 and 2.9 months of inventory. We know when it starts getting into over 3.2, we're in trouble. When we start getting over 4, it's like a red flag. So we're always measuring that compared to how quickly we're shipping and how well we're shipping. And that's the marriage. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at cash, we're looking at your conversions. There's often two metrics to look at. You're often not looking at one metric. There should be a counterbalancing metric on the other end as well.
And are you familiar with the throughput accounting?
Throughput, yeah, we've seen a bit of throughput accounting, yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing that's interesting to look at. This is a book called The Goal by Mr. Goldratt there.
Yeah.
Really, really great book, and it's fun. It's in the novel form, so it's actually entertaining, and instead of being dry business theory, and it would change you from doing your accounting from the cost world to the throughput world, which is how much do you produce, how much leaves the factory, and what is your actual cost to, not the direct cost the way it's typically calculated, but the cost to actually get the goods out, or and all kind of delays that he shows you the calculation. You say, okay, well, the cost, for example, of having an always available employee. Let's use a random rate. Let's pretend it's $30 per hour. Well, you say the guy could actually sometime not be there and stuff like that to micro optimize locally. Yeah, okay, but you're missing the big picture that if this guy is not available all the time in that main machine, which is a bottleneck, stops producing, that is actually, let's say, a $30,000 per hour loss. If that machine is not running at all time, your $30 per hour of micro optimization is misplaced. This guy should always be there, even if he's reading a book or something, you know. So there's all kind of additional calculation that he gets you into that are really amazing. So the throughput accounting and the book, the goal, really, really worth it.
I want to warn your audience when you're going to start listening to this book or reading it, whether it's audio or whether it's in a reading format, that there's a lot of cheesy parts to it. Get ready. The guy has a funny relationship with his wife. It really is like a novel, and
Yes,
it's actually
yes,
it's
it is a
hilarious.
novel. Yeah,
It's really funny. But he also speaks a lot about in that book, Guillaume, as you remember, of the theory of constraints, right?
yeah,
And I think that's something that's
that's
another
the main
very,
thing.
very
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that theory of constraints and really understanding, looking at examples, which he obviously doesn't give this example, but it goes hand in hand. Of the iPod, I remember when I was working at Radio Shack or the Source, if people, that's what it got changed to. I was working there during my university days. We used to sell MP3 players, right? No one really understood how they worked. A real techie person would come in, they'd spend $100, $150. They could only get 32 songs on this MP3 player. We didn't really know where they were getting the music and how they were getting it onto the MP3 player. And we were selling these things. Next thing you know, Apple and Steve Jobs launches the iPod, right? And what was the constraint that he solved there was the number of songs on the small device. So he got Toshiba and he convinced them to give him exclusivity on the chip. He was able to get 1,000 songs onto an iPod compared to 32 or 64, right? So it's an exponential 20-time increase of number of songs on there. And by solving that constraint, now someone said, you know what, I could have all of my favorite songs on me when I'm walking, when I'm running, or when I'm, out and about on public transport. So, those type of ideas, once again, they were all originated from this book, The Goal, which is unbelievable when you think about it.
Yeah, and I remember that Steve Jobs keynote. Yeah, 1,000 songs in your pocket was what he was saying. So yeah, you're right. That was the constraint that he was solving. If for a reasonable price, it's still pricey, but it was reasonable price that you could afford it if you wanted. Very interesting. Okay, it's pretty good tour of the cash question. There's always more that you can discuss if you're talking like VC venture capital or angel investors, seed rounds, and all that stuff. I don't have a lot of personal experience on that on those topics. We're self-funded for the growth. I think you're to some degree self-funded plus bank loans and so on for the growth. Is there anything else that comes to mind for the topic of cash?
Well, I think those two models are very different, and it's probably like you mentioned a whole other conversation. I work with a lot of clients that are VC funded or that are full public market. It's a different model. I think it's a different concept, a different mentality. You have to actually be a different type of entrepreneur because you have to potentially be willing to not only give up big chunks of your business, but also be willing to lose in certain cases money every single month. If you're really going that route, especially publicly, see so many companies in the public market that are actually losing money on a month-to-month basis because they're trying to grow so fast and they're churning and burning. And I've always struggled with the model. I mean, that's always for me as a coach is going in there and trying to make people find profitable growth. It's a struggle, but I have a couple of clients that actually go through that model. I would say the most important thing to keep in mind is define early what you want to be as a business. A lot of times those businesses that succeed is because they know that they want to be VC backed or they want to be, on the public markets. They want to get there as quickly as possible. It brings a whole other set of challenges, but it's a different model. What I find challenging for people is sometimes they're not sure what they want their model to be. And so they get stuck in between two models. Do I want to be private? Do I want to be VC backed? Do I want to be full IPO? And when you get mixed up and confused about that, you end up making a lot of bad decisions along the way.
Yeah, whichever game you play that game only and
Yeah,
go all in.
stick to your game. Stick to your
Yeah.
game. That's why we always stuck to the private game. We didn't want anything to do with the, fast growth or growth just for the sake of growing. We wanted profitable growth. So yes, we grew at a pretty decent pace, but it was profitable because we were coming from family bankruptcy and we were coming from a public company. So we knew what came with that, the constraints, the limitations, the pressure, and we didn't want that in our lives anymore. So we made a decision to go in a whole other direction. Not to say, you never know where you'll end up back again one day, and if that's going to be something to pursue. But pick your poison and stick to it. Like you gotta pick it, and you just
Yeah.
try to run with it. Because if you start pivoting in the middle or trying to switch, that's where I see people get lost along the way.
Yeah, if you're privately funded, you do want to generate a profit, then that is more important than the speed of the growth. You don't have to chase profit at all costs, just some level of profitability. And if you're VC back, then it's like you said, it's a completely different ball game, and you can afford to lose money every month because those are typically not the quarterly objective. It's more like how much market share can I grab this month, and we know we'll be profitable within 2 years, 3 years, whatever, or or per cohort. You can say, okay, well, the 2021 cohort was profitable, and you prove that the next year, and then the next year they just keep losing money in a global way, but their per cohort analysis is actually profitable on past client acquisition, and they're just growing at an incredibly fast rate because they're raising money by the hundreds of millions. So if you're not playing that game, just go for profit.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah,
be clear on
because
it. Be clear
you'll
on it.
run out of money. So be careful if you're growing very fast and you're losing money. Of course, it costs money to grow, and when you're in between sizes of company, you're stable at one size, very profitable. You need to move to the next one. Happened to us. It was way less profitable. We're making more money than when we're smaller. But then you take the time to restructure that, or sometimes means, well, you're still too much in between. You need to grow a little bit more so that your model makes sense. You don't stay stuck in between with a lot of added overhead and new process and new system that are expensive per month, whatever. You need to reach the next threshold of stability and profitability with that new model in place.
Totally agree with you. Yes, be clear on your model, and yeah, you want to stick to it. I mean, that's the last thing I'll mention for the cash, Guillaume. I think is really important. When you look at the way we designed and scaling up, the model of cash was actually built in collaboration with Vern by two very smart individuals. Greg Crabtree, who wrote Simple Numbers. So anybody wants to check out Greg, he's a fantastic resource. Really, that book, Simple Numbers, is absolutely worth reading for any one of your audience members. And the second person was Alan Miltz, and Alan Miltz is the one who built Cash Flow Story. Those two individuals are cash gurus. They really help build the model. And the one thing I will say about net profit, which I think should be a great last point to leave off on, is when you're thinking about your net profit at the end of the year, this is how we really see the model. At 5% net profit, you're near bankruptcy. Okay, that's just not enough. It's going to be dangerous. You're going to be close. You're too close to the red line. You're not in a good position. You need to find yourself to be more profitable. 10% is your acceptable level. So if you're making 10% net profit per year, we consider that to be an acceptable level. 15% profit is what we should be aiming for. However, as a rule of thumb, and it's not the same for every company, but as a rule of thumb, when you get to 15% net profit, typically your people are overextended. So you probably don't have quite enough staff. You're probably pushing people a little too much. You're probably burning out some of the individuals in your company. You're probably stressed out as well. You're happy because you're making all this money. But what you want to do is when you get to 15% net profit, you probably have to hire some more people, bring in more resources and structure. It will cost you money, but it'll bring you back down. Try not to go back under 10. Try to get back to that 10% area and then rebuild from there to get back. And you're always fluctuating between 15 and 10, 15 and 10. That's a general rule of thumb that we really teach and that Vern has taught us with Greg and with Alan Miltz. So I think it's a good model to follow. There's going to be companies out there that are wildly profitable. Going to be companies out there. I have clients in the construction industry. It's rough, man. Their profit, their net profit is very low, but that's kind of the industry you pick. But that's where you really want to be. Always hovering between 10 and 15% net profit.
And what type of company you are will change typically those numbers, unless you just set that as a way to grow. Like, for example, Amazon, that never wants to post too much profit. They want to just keep reinvesting, and that's the infinite growth game. But it's different. It's a publicly backed company and so on. So some companies, when they're more specialized, they will try to aim for the 20-25% net profit range, and some that are more generalist, they'll be more like around the 15%. But also, if you're a product-based business, it's a different kind of numbers, and then those 10 to 15% numbers are probably actually reality. So depending if you're a service or a product, and if you're a specialized industry or not, if you were to have some kind of a specialized cardiologist clinic, I'm pretty sure they can get more than 10-15% because of such a high level of expertise. But you need to be ultra specialized to command those higher percentage typically. And if you look at, let's say, the Canada's fastest growing 500, Inc. 500, they have a line there, more than 10% net profit or less, that, and they just tell you if it's more or less. So it is true that it's sort of a threshold that investors look at and so on, that you want to, if you can, be above the 10% net profit threshold.
Absolutely. And you're right. There's going to be exceptions, and there's companies out there that are going to make way, way, way more money. And even the Apples of this world, right? They're just wildly profitable. And there's companies out there, and you should aim for that. If you're, listening to this here, it's because you want to learn, and you can do it. There's ways to do it. In our coaching business, the model is very, very lucrative. It works out really well, very little overhead. Again, it's rare. And when you start having a large team, or you start having a lot of products and services to launch, the typical business, that's the rule of thumb. So,
Right.
Just be aware of it. If you're hovering anywhere under 10, it is a little bit of a red flag. So you have to look at your numbers. And if you're anywhere around 5 or less, you're in major danger zone, because one big thing could happen in your business that could just shut your doors. So be very careful with that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, those are good numbers for a quick scaling up, which is the whole goal here of scaling up system. If the profit is just too high at one point, it just means you're not reinvesting enough in the growth of the company, basically in the infrastructure and training the staff and so on. So if you want to build world-class systems and staff, you need to reinvest a lot of that money.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think that was very good discussion on this topic. So thank you, Shawn, for being here today.
Thank you, Guillaume. It's been a real pleasure. This is a great topic.
And if people want to find you, where can they do that?
Best place to go is the website. Two places. Website, elevationleaders.com. So you'll have all the information there for what we do. And you could also go to LinkedIn. I'm very, very active at Shawn Johal at LinkedIn. You'll definitely find me there talking and posting every day. So.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here today, Shawn.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.